but it's the French Revolution. And so his patron, the Secretary of the Treasury, is fired, purged, arrested, convicted, tortured, imprisoned, and then the night before he was to be executed by the guillotine, he kills himself. So as not to give his revolutionary adversaries in the more left-wing Mountain Party, headed by Robespierre and Saint-Just, the satisfaction of killing him. He said, I'm going to kill myself, thinking there was value to that. Somehow, Jean-Baptiste Say manages to escape the purging of his patron, not just with his life and his liberty, but with his property as well. And so he moves out to the countryside. He says, I'm going to be a landowner, a gentleman farmer, and a freelance intellectual writing books, as opposed to being a treasury bureaucrat. Being a treasury bureaucrat is simply too risky. And in 1803, Jean-Baptiste Say publishes his Principles of Political Economy. At a time when all of Europe is consumed in an uproar about the Napoleonic Wars, he's going to sit back in his country home and simply write books about economics. And given the likely life expectancy of French treasury officials, I kind of understand the choice. And Say confronted this very question. Can we be certain that the circular flow of economic activity will add up? And Say said yes. Say said, after all, that nobody's going to make anything unless they plan to use it themselves or to sell it, and that nobody is going to plan to sell nobody's going to sell anything unless they plan to use the money from selling in order to buy something else. And so that means that everybody's total planned sales of goods and services, including their labor, must be equal to everybody's total planned spending. So the idea that there could be a shortage of demand in the economy as a whole is simply incoherent. That you could well have a shortage of demand for one commodity. Lattes say, if the assembled people of Berkeley decide that we're much too wired, certainly I know I've had more than enough caffeine by this time of the day, and should drop off, decide they're too wired, and perhaps we should pursue inner peace and go take some yoga lessons instead. So you could have a shortage of demand for lattes, but it would be offset because then I would be planning to spend money on yoga lessons, and I'd be out there looking for a yoga instructor. And so Say said, well, we certainly can have sectoral unemployment. We can have armies of unemployed baristas down on Shattuck Avenue desperately searching for some place to hire them. We can't have general unemployment because the absence of demand for one good is associated with an excess of demand for another, because since planned incomes have to be equal to planned spending, if there's less demand for cups of coffee, there's got to be more demand for yoga lessons. And that if the baristas would only move 2 blocks up, they'd find signs in windows of exercise studios saying yoga instructor wanted. So that's what Say said, and that turned out to be wrong. As an economist a generation younger than Jean-Baptiste Say said, the British one, John Stuart Mill, because people don't just buy currently produced goods and services with their incomes. They also buy and sell financial assets, chiefly liquid cash money, but other things as well. And if there's an excess of demand for financial assets, then there very much can be a deficient demand for currently produced goods and services. And after all, if everyone says, I'm not going to buy either a yoga lesson or a latte, I'm instead going to hold on to my cash, and whatever money I earn, I'm going to keep in my wallet because I have only 120 in my wallet and I really want to have 5. Well, then you have an excess demand for cash and deficient demand for both yoga and coffee. And businesses then fire workers. Now, back in Jean-Baptiste Say's scenario, where we had deficient demand for coffee and excess demand for yoga, it was pretty clear what was going to happen. A bunch of people who work as the coffee shops are going to be fired, and then they're going to frantically retrain themselves to take advantage of the high wages and job openings in the yoga instructor market. That's what happens when you have a sectoral shift. But when the excess demand is not for any particular currently produced good or service, but is for liquid cash money instead, well, yeah, it's still the case that the coffee shops fire people, but how can you enter the money-creating business? Maybe you can go down in your basement and start trying to use a fine pen to draw counterfeit copies of $20 bills, but there's no other way to easily enter the money printing business. And so when there's an excess demand for money in the economy as a whole, it can get quite thoroughly wedged, as in fact we are, as we see in our labor market right now, which has gotten quite thoroughly wedged. Now, we do talk about a labor market, but it's a metaphor. It's not like everyone gets together in the town square on Thursday to sell their eggs and their cloth for rice and prices go up and down, and at the end everyone goes home satisfied having sold everything. Labor market is 150 million workers, 10 million firms, 5 million people getting new jobs each month. A very complicated matching process in which each decision to hire or fire is set at a different negotiated price. It's a very large, decentralized, slow-moving process, rather than just a single market where there's a supply curve and a demand curve and everyone knows what the equilibrium price is and everything produced for sale is then bought and sold. Instead, we have unemployment. There we have the unemployment rate from FRED, the Federal Reserve Economic Data database, at the website research.stlouisfed.org/FRED2, which is one of the places you ought to go to do your first problem set. This is the unemployment rate as calculated by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The number of people interviewed in the current population survey who said they were looking for work, divided by the number of people who said they had jobs, plus the number of people who said they were looking for work. And, in normal times, the unemployment rate fluctuates between 4 and 6% or so. And you can talk about structural unemployment there. Bunches of people who really don't have the skills to get the jobs they want, but who keep looking anyway and don't find anything. You can talk about frictional unemployment. Bunches of people who just got fired or who just quit in disgust or who just re-entered the labor force or entered it, who haven't yet found jobs because they're holding out for a better job than the one they could get if they had to get a job today, which would be, working at Safeway as checking stuff out. And they think they can get a better job than that. But right now our unemployment rate isn't between 4 and 6%. It's kissing 10%. There are lots of people without work who say they would really like jobs like the ones other people with their education and skills have, like the ones they used to have. Why can't they find them? Why do we have an extraordinary inventory of excess workers looking for jobs? We really don't see this in many other markets. We don't see a lot of cases in which there's a huge number of some particular good that everyone agrees is valuable, but that can't really find a market. And there are a couple of theories about how the market really isn't out of whack. Say the Great Vacation theory, that it's simply that Americans decided they've been working too hard and too long in 2007, and so a bunch of people decided we really don't want a job anymore, but as long as the government will pay me unemployment insurance, if I say I'm looking for a new one, I'll say I'm looking for a new job, even though not really. That's one theory. A Great Forgetting theory, that we have a whole bunch of workers there who had jobs in 2007, but yet somehow they're really unproductive, they're the real slackers, they're the people who it costs more money to actually get someone to supervise them and make sure they don't break something than they could possibly produce, and that the rise in unemployment from 5 to 10%, is due to the fact we recognize we have these zero marginal product workers out there, or perhaps firms have forgotten how to manage them. I don't believe that's what's going on at all. Let's do a simple instant recall question. What is the unemployment rate right now? As I said, normally it's between 4 and 6%. What's going on All right. And there we go. And 9.4%, correct. That's the right answer. I'll also give credit for B, because while the unemployment rate reported on the TV for the month of December is 9.4%, the actual unemployment rate in December is 9.1%. That is, of the people whom the Bureau of Labor Statistics asked in the current population survey who were in the labor force, 9.1% of them said they were unemployed. But December's Christmas. And when Christmas comes around, their unemployment rate is almost always lower than it usually is the rest of the year, because a whole bunch of extra people have been hired to work retail and delivery for all kinds of firms for the Christmas rush. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics thinks that in the month of December, the unemployment rate is 0.3% lower than it is in an average month. And so it seasonally adjusts it by adding 0.3%, and so reports the unemployment rate as 9.4% seasonally adjusted, as opposed to 9.1%, the not seasonally adjusted measure. Right. So I'd take 9.1%. But yeah, it's 9.4%. It's up there. Why am I confident that our high unemployment is the result of a lack of demand in the economy, rather than of something bad going on the supply side, either a loss of work ethic or a loss of human capital or a loss of organizational capital? Well, one way is to look at quits. Right? That if unemployment were high because a bunch of people had decided they really didn't want to have jobs, you'd expect to see that the number of people who were quitting their jobs would have gone up between 2007 and today, and it hasn't. It's gone down. It used to be that about 3 million people a month would quit their jobs, just get fed up with their bosses or be moving someplace else and said either friendly or not friendly, I quit. Then when the recession hit, the number of quits dropped to below 2 million a month and has stayed way down there. That 1/3 of the people who would normally have quit their jobs in an average month haven't been quitting their jobs for 2 years. Why not? Well, because unemployment's high. They know if they quit a job, they're going to have a very hard time getting another one. Your willingness to quit has gone way down precisely because demand is slack and unemployment is high. That behavior of quits is inconsistent with any kind of great vacation theory. Layoffs. Businesses used to fire about 1.8 million people every month. Either fire them because they think they're slackers or lay them off because they're closing down or whatever. Then starting in mid-2008, when the flow of spending on currently produced goods and services dropped off, the number of layoffs and discharges rose to 2.5 million a month. Stayed there for 6 to 9 months or so, and since then has slowly come back to normal. The businesses aren't firing people at an elevated rate anymore. Things are no longer getting much worse in the labor market, but it's not the case that layoffs are especially low. And there was this substantial period during which layoffs were very high, and no sign that the people fired were fired because they'd suddenly become worse at doing their jobs. Instead, they were fired because businesses found they had fewer consumers, fewer purchasers in late 2008 and 2009. The obverse of fires is hires. It used to be that in normal times, American businesses would be hiring 5 million people a month. Then when demand dropped off, they dropped their hiring back to 4 million, and it stayed back at 4 million, except during this little blip in 2010, which is hiring for the census. They're hiring for the census, they hired the census workers, then the census jobs came to an end, the number of hires went back to normal. It's not the case that businesses are trying to hire more people, and it's definitely not the case that hires are low because although businesses want to hire people, they can't find workers with the skills that they need. Not just the number of hirings has fallen, but the number of job openings that firms post has fallen as well. The net effect of more firings, fewer quits, and fewer hirings is more unemployed people. And an awful lot of the unemployed people have now been unemployed for a long time. Right? More than 6 million people unemployed for more than half a year, people who haven't had a job in at least 6 months, when normally that number of people is between 1 million and 2 million. And back in 2006, you'd have said that the million people who say they're looking for a job but haven't found one in 6 months, well, they're really not looking that hard. They really don't want a job that much. They just want to say they want a job so their relatives aren't on their back so much. It's much, much harder to say that when the number of long-term unemployed is up at 6 million or so. And let me stop there because we're running out of time, and because I want to be a good citizen in terms of allowing the great flow of people through Berkeley to maintain itself at the appropriate pace, and say we'll see you again next Tuesday when I'll start on economic growth.